Who hired the cat's paw assassin who tried to kill Bran way back at the start of A Song of Ice and Fire? Was it ever confirmed? Let's take a look. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. On this channel we dive deep into the history and lore of A Song of Ice and Fire, as well as The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher. If you're new here, welcome. The attempted assassination of Bran Stark in the opening chapters of A Song of Ice and Fire is one of the key moments that set House Stark and House Lannister on an inevitable march towards war. Cat becomes sure that Tyrion was behind it and captures him, leading Tywin to raise his army, Jaime to confront Ned, and, well, we all know what follows. But for most of the characters in the story, the identity of who actually hired the assassin remains a complete mystery. So let's dig into the clues that George R.R. Martin has left us and see whether we can figure out who done it. First of all, just to clear up the nomenclature, what is a cat's paw assassin? Well, a cat's paw is simply someone who is being used by someone else for their own ends. So this means that the assassin did not himself have a grudge against Bran, he was just doing someone else's dirty work. Similarly, the dagger is not a special kind of dagger called a cat's paw dagger, it's just the dagger that the cat's paw assassin used. To recap briefly what happened, Bran is in a coma after being pushed out of that window by Jaime, and Cat sits by his bedside day and night. Robb is also there when they hear a commotion from elsewhere in the castle. There's a fire in the library. Robb rushes out to help, taking the guards outside the door with him. Then Cat turns, and there is a man brandishing a knife. "You weren't supposed to be here. No one was supposed to be here," he says. And then when it's clear he is there to kill Bran, he adds, "It's a mercy. He's dead already." Cat tries to scream for help, but he grabs her. There's a scuffle and her hand gets cut, but then Summer, Bran's direwolf, leaps into the fray and kills the assassin. There is, of course, a swift investigation, which discovers that the assassin wasn't known in Winterfell. He had apparently only recently appeared and had been sleeping in the stables. He appears to have been paid 90 silver coins. They found it in his hidey hole in the stables, and the Valyrian steel dagger. The silver is neither here nor there. The dagger, however, was precious, like life-changingly precious. Valyrian steel is incredibly rare, and if word got out that the dagger was for sale, say, the noble houses of Westeros would be falling over themselves to bid for it. So this assassin had been paid a lot. But it has to be said that he doesn't come across as a particularly skilled assassin. He seems surprised that Cat is there, despite her having been there for over 3 weeks by that point, and seems uncertain what to do about it. Then, when he decides to stop her from screaming first, he can't even subdue her, despite her being rather weak at the time and unarmed, and he is caught unawares by Summer racing in because he forgot to even close the door behind him when he came in. Yes, the idea to distract people by lighting the fire in the library was clever, but beyond that, he was pretty inept. Simply put, this was not a well-trained assassin. Which has to be our first clue. A mediocre at best assassin who didn't know that Cat never left that room was hired to kill Bran after he was pushed from the tower and was paid a ridiculous sum to do it. The justification for the attempt appears to be because it's a mercy to kill him. And as an aside, whoever was behind it probably didn't care much about books because they burned down a library. So let's follow these clues to where they lead. We can probably rule out Tyrion simply on the basis that he would be aghast at the idea of burning down a library, but thankfully we also have the further evidence of his POV chapters. He spends a lot of time trying to figure out who did it, so he clearly didn't, and neither did Jaime, whose POV we are also in when he is trying to figure out who did it. Of course, Cat doesn't know that, and she takes the knife, the biggest bit of evidence and the largest oddity in this case. Seriously, how could such an unimpressive assassin have a weapon like that, down to King's Landing to seek answers? While there, Littlefinger tells her that the dagger was once his, but that he lost it in a bet to Tyrion. She believes him, and when she happens upon Tyrion at the inn at the crossroads, she arrests him and takes him for trial, but she's, of course, wrong. Littlefinger was lying to her. And in the show, They sort of left it at that. The cat's paw dagger was brought up again later when Littlefinger is effectively put on trial for his crimes. It's confirmed that it is his, and then he is executed. So we're left to assume that he was behind it all. But that's not how it is in the books. Littlefinger lying to pin the blame on Tyrion is still the case, but that doesn't mean that he was guilty of hiring the cat's paw. He always wanted to make the best use of whatever opportunities arose to further his own agenda, and being presented with the dagger there was a clear opportunity to increase tensions between the Starks and the Lannisters. In fact, thinking about it, this particular lie does have the ring of something made up on the spot. It sounds convincing at first, but a little bit of investigation would have shown it to be untrue. Lots of people would have seen that Littlefinger lost the dagger in a bet with King Robert, not Tyrion. If Littlefinger had known in advance that a knife he'd used to own would be used in an assassination attempt, surely he'd have come up with a better lie than that. Added to which, when asked whether Littlefinger was behind it, George R. R. Martin has said, well, Littlefinger did have a certain influence over Joff, but he was not at Winterfell, and that needs to be remembered. So probably not Littlefinger. And we have a bit more information about that dagger. It belonged to King Robert, and so presumably came up to Winterfell with him, along with most of the rest of his court. So was it Robert? He may not have been the best of kings, but killing his best friend's son? That doesn't seem like him. So who does that leave? Well, the timing, the mediocrity of the assassin hired, and the ridiculous price paid all give the impression of someone who was there in Winterfell, doesn't have the patience to plan a proper job, doesn't know much about hiring an assassin, and doesn't really appreciate the value of the dagger. In other words, a spur-of-the-moment thing by someone rich, privileged, cruel, and not particularly clever or strategic. For me, that leaves just two prime candidates who both match that profile, Cersei and Joffrey. Cersei definitely had a motive. Bran was a witness to her and Jaime being together, and if he woke up, that could cause her a big problem. She opines to Tyrion that it is no mercy for Bran to live, which does seem to echo what the cat's paw says later, and Jaime admits to Tyrion that they did discuss the possibility of killing Bran, but concluded that the guard on the door and Cat always being in the room made it very hard to get away with it without killing half of Winterfell. Jaime was further convinced that if Jaime had wanted Bran dead, she would have asked Jaime himself to do it, which rings true. Tyrion is sure that even Cersei wouldn't be so foolish as to arm the assassin with a weapon that could so easily be traced back to her husband, and probably most damningly, if Cersei had hired the assassin, she would surely have told him that Cat would be in the room because she knew that for sure, but the assassin was clearly surprised by her presence, so all in all, Cersei seems unlikely. Which leaves Joffrey. He certainly fits the profile we've built up of someone rich, cruel, and not particularly clever or strategic, and when we get into A Storm of Swords, Tyrion and Jaime both independently come to the conclusion that it was him. So what evidence is there? Well, quite a lot, as it happens. First, he's the only person that we're explicitly told hadn't gone to pay his respects to the Starks about Bran, so the only person who wouldn't know that Cat was always in Bran's room. Then we get Tyrion remembering this moment. He remembered a cold morning when he'd climbed down the steep exterior steps from Winterfell's library to find Prince Joffrey jesting with the Hound about killing wolves. "Send a dog to kill a wolf," he said. Even Joffrey was not so foolish as to command Sandor Clegane to slay a son of Eddard Stark. However, instead, the boy found his cat's paw among the unsavoury lot of free riders, merchants, and camp followers who'd attached themselves to the king's party as they made their way north. Note the imagery of Joffrey loitering outside the library that would later be set on fire, and joking about killing Starks. Still later, we get more incriminating imagery, and a clue that convinces Tyrion that Joffrey did it. It's Joffrey and Marjorie's wedding breakfast, and Joffrey is being presented with gifts. Tyrion gives him a rather lovely book about the kings of Westeros, which Joffrey clearly has no time for, and Tywin gives him a Valyrian steel sword. We read this. Joffrey brought Widow's Wail down in a savage two-handed slice onto the book that Tyrion had given him. The heavy leather cover parted at a stroke. Sharp! I told you I am no stranger to Valyrian steel. Another bit of evidence of Joffrey really disliking books while wielding Valyrian steel, and if you go with the theory that Bran will end up as king, then what we're seeing here is symbolically or figuratively Joffrey destroying books while trying to kill King Bran with Valyrian steel. Anyway, the bit which grabs Tyrion's attention is Joffrey bragging that he was no stranger to Valyrian steel. How? House Lannister didn't have a Valyrian steel sword until now. The Baratheon family didn't seem to either, nor were there any Targaryen swords still in King's Landing. Perhaps then the cat's paw dagger. So Tyrion, a bit drunk by this point, says, "Perhaps a knife, sire, to match your sword. A dagger of the same fine Valyrian steel, with a dragonbone hilt, say?" Joff gave him a sharp look. Yes, a dagger to match my sword. Good. Joffrey is clearly rattled by this. So all the hints are there, but why? Why would Joffrey do it? Well, Cersei recalls a family conversation at Winterfell when Robert Baratheon says of Bran that "We kill our horses when they break a leg, our dogs when they go blind, but we are too weak to give the same mercy to crippled children." This is the same language that the cat's paw uses when he's about to attack Bran. It's a mercy, he says. Why does this implicate Joffrey? Because we're told that he was in the room when the man he thought was his father said it, and Joffrey, in his cruel way, wanted to impress and please the king, or at least do as he thought kings should do. If the king thought that Bran should be put down, Joffrey could arrange that. At least that's what Jaime thinks happened. That may sound like a warped motivation to us, and it is, but two of the people who knew Joffrey best, Jaime and Tyrion, both concluded that it was exactly the kind of thing that he would do. So there you have it. Maybe you might think there are more clues to come, but George R. R. Martin suggests not. A few months before the publication of A Storm of Swords, he said that, "I will tell you that A Storm of Swords will resolve the question of Bran and the dagger." The only significant additional information we get in that book is Tyrion and Jaime both independently deciding that it was Joffrey based on the evidence we've just looked at, so that's presumably what George R. R. Martin meant. So if he's leaving it there, we probably should too, because ultimately the fact that it was Joffrey doesn't actually matter that much as far as the main plot is concerned. Joffrey may well have been the person who hired the assassin, he probably was, but it was Littlefinger who used the attempt to further his own ambitions, creating hurt and chaos across the Seven Kingdoms. But what do you think? Do you agree? Let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to see more videos like this, then please check out my A Song of Ice and Fire playlist on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. Thanks for watching. That's all for this time. I'll see you again soon.